Hello everyone. Welcome to Monday, March 23rd, Brilliant Labs Design Skills. Doing a bit of Tinker This with Brilliant Labs this afternoon. My name is John and I will be your host on this journey. Hopefully we'll be able to teach you a few things with regards to TinkerCad today, and hopefully everyone is doing very well out there. So, without further ado, I need everyone who's with us today to type in TinkerCad.com into their browser window. So TinkerCad is a free program used for design in schools all the time. It is a sign-in type of program, so if you are a very young student, you might need to get your parents' permission before you do this, because you will need an email aspect. But I'm going to go through fairly, not too rapidly, the Join Now process. So Join Now is the big button to the right-hand side. I'm going to click Join Now. If you are an educator, you can join here as a specialized teacher account, and your specialized teacher account will allow you to assign classes and get class codes and that sort of thing, which will then allow students to join your class, as you can see here in the center of the screen. You can also create your own personal account, which is in the center, right there on the bottom. So I'm going to click on that today, and we're going to take you through the process just to make sure everybody understands. Okay? So I'm going to click on Create a Personal Account. So I can sign up with a general email, or I can sign in with Google. So I'm going to sign up with an email just to take you through the process so that you understand. First thing it's going to ask you is create an account as country, territory, or region. Okay, so I'm going to click on what my country is. I'm assuming that most of us today are coming from Canada, but I make no assumptions. So whatever your country is, please choose that on the big list that's there. And then they're going to ask you to put in your birthday. I'm putting in my birthday, or my fictitious birthday, the birthday I wish I had. I've always wished I had February 7th for a birthday. And I've always wished I was younger than I was. So I'm going to make myself a little bit younger today. And I'm going to create my account. So I'm going to click Next. This is the place where it's going to ask you for an email. And this is the thing that you might need your parents' help with. So I'm going to put in an email here. And then I'm going to sign up a password for it. Okay, so I'm going to give it a password, and I'm just going to, you can actually use a securely generated password because it's being offered to me. I'm going to use that. So there's my password. Might need to write that one down. And then I just have to agree to the TinkerCad terms of service. If you want to read those, it's always interesting to read something like that once. But then you click on Create Account. So then I click on Done, and it takes me into TinkerCad. So we're not going to do the tutorial in this case. I'm going to X this down because I don't want to do the tutorial here. I'm going to take you through a tutorial. But there are some interesting tutorials that you can access on your own with the Learn button, which I'm going to show you in a second. So I'm going to X that down. So here's my window. My window has, along the top, it has the gallery. So that's where you can look at a lot of other things that people are doing. It has a blog where you can follow people and see what new things they've created in TinkerCad. The Learn section, of course, we were just talking about that. The Learn section is where you'll find the tutorials and other things that will teach you neat things about TinkerCad. So everything is good there. On the left-hand side, we have 3D designs. We have circuits and code blocks. I am going to do mostly 3D designs today, but I will show you a little bit about circuits. Code blocks is an interesting theme we will probably do on another day. So because I have no designs in here, because this is a newly created account, I'm going to create a new design. And that new design, as soon as I click the button, brings me into the new window. And that new window is the one I'm going to orient you to now. Okay? So everything is good now. Everything seems to be working well. You have along the top, you have the TinkerCad, which takes you back to the dashboard, which is the place we were just in. You have recent designs. Those would be ones that you've created. You have a name. Interestingly enough, the way the TinkerCad assigns names is it picks an adjective out of a hat, a randomly generated adjective, and it picks a name out of a hat. So it takes a two and creates the name there. We can, though, click on this and give it our own name. And I'm going to call it keychain because that's the first thing I'm going to do today is keychain. I'm going to continue going across the screen. We're actually doing 3D design, but there are other things we can do in TinkerCad. We can also do blocks, which we will probably do another time. We can also do bricks, and that name I probably can't mention because of copyright reasons right now, but it's something like Ego. I can also invite people to the design with me so you can design collaboratively, which is a very interesting thing to do. This, of course, is my account, so this is where all my account information is. I'm going to go down to the next level. Right off the bat, I have copy. And right after copy, of course, I have paste. And right after paste, I have duplicate and repeat. And then I have the ever-present and very important trash can. Because at the end of all these things, at the end of everything that we do, with all of the things we do here at Brilliant Labs, failure is an option, and making a mistake is possible. And if those things are possible, then sometimes you need to start again, or you need to throw away part of what you're doing and just try something a little bit different. Because the more you make mistakes, the more learning happens for you. See, I just made a mistake. Then you have my favorite, the undo button. I'm told I can mention Lego. So moving on, we have the undo button, which is my favorite button. And we have the redo button, which once you undo and you go, no, that's not what I meant to do, you can go back and try it again. These are very important things, once again, because of the mistake potential when doing designs. And then when we come across a bit further, we have the show all. It's going to show everything that's in your window, making sure that you see everything that's there, even the stuff that may be hidden because of the way things have been designed. You have the group button, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes and how important it is. The ungroup button, which if you can group, you should be able to ungroup. Align and mirror. And what mirror does is flip things on their axis. You have import, so if you've got 3D files saved from somewhere else, you can import them and then edit them in TinkerCad. We do that all the time here at Brilliant Labs. You have the export button, which we are going to get to as we move through our tutorial. The export is where we save the file so that we can put it into a 3D print. And then you have the send to, which is share that with people and other apps. So you can take your design and work with that. Rather than continuing going across the screen, I'm going to move down now. Work plane, what you're looking at in the center there of the screen is your work plane. It says work plane down on the bottom left-hand corner. And it's set up as a grid. Its grid is set up in that little tiny squares are all 1 millimeter. And that says the snap grid is 1 millimeter. And then you can edit your grid if you want to. We usually leave these things alone, and we usually leave the snap grid to about 1 millimeter. The reason is because we're 3D printing, and when you 3D print, you want these measurements to be really good. You want them to be there, right? So you want it to measure and be the same as what you're going to do in your other design, right? So that's all good. So the work plane is what's set up on the right-hand side. And then below the work plane, you also have a ruler. You could use a ruler. I like the work plane better because it replicates a 3D printer bed. It isn't exactly the same size, but it is a representation, which is fairly important. Below the ruler and work plane tools, there are the basic shapes of TinkerCAD, and those are the ones we're going to stay on for the most part. We're going to make sure that that's what we do with that, okay? So we have to start with a box and a cylinder. Those there, though, are interesting, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But there's all sorts of different shapes, scribbles, texts, pyramids. These are all the basic shapes of TinkerCad, and that's where we're going to pretty well stay for the duration of what we're doing today. On the left-hand side of our screen, as we scroll over, we have different views. This is one of the things I love about TinkerCad, is that capability of changing view with no mess, no fuss. So I can look at a top view of whatever I'm doing, which is a view from above, so I see everything above. I can do a perspective view, which I do like. I like the 3D perspective, so I get a sense of how things are going to work. You can do a front view, which is very important in 3D printing, because if we're designing for 3D printing here today, we have to make sure that whatever we design comes down onto that plane. It sits there pretty well flat, because if it's above that plane, it's not going to work. Okay? If it's above the plane, it's going to print in air. And if it's printing in air, it's not going to print correctly. There's also the home button, which takes us back to the original view, which is perspective. There's the view that will bring us right to whatever we've created. There's a zoom in and a zoom out function. And then there's what's called a flat view or an orthographic view. This orthographic view has a lot of very important connotations in design, but for our purposes is not a necessary view that we're going to use a lot today. So now that you've been oriented to this, we're going to take you through a little miniature design of our own, okay? So I like to keep things fairly simple, so I'm going to start with a box. The way I bring the box into my work plane is I click, hold, and drag it, and then I drop it on my work plane. As soon as I drop it, I see that it's a solid, because my shape window is up here now. So it's a solid. This is called a shape inspector, by the way. You can show and hide it, so you can hide it so you can't see everything there, or you can show it. It tells me how many steps it has, but also tells me its length, width, and height. So a couple of things to note here. Number one, you can edit the dimensions of this cube here in this window by either moving the sliders or clicking on and changing any of those. Now we're not going to do that because it's not a, you can do it if you're looking for exact measurements, but for the most part we're going to do a bit of pull and drag, and that's how we're going to make our measurements work, but we can also edit them in some other place. The other thing to note is the solid and the hole. You can also use a different color. I am going to use a different color because I find red a bit hard on the eye, so I'm going to use, oh, you know what? I'm going to use purple. I wonder why. I'm going to use purple, but it's very important to note that this purple block, if I am going to do 3D printing with this block, whenever I create with it, it's not going to come out in this color. A 3D printer can only print with the color of what the color of the filament is. Now there are 3D printers around that have what are called multi-material or multicolor heads, which they feed more than one roll of filament at a time. But for the most part, a lot of the 3D printers you'll find in school are single extrusion heads, which means that they're only going to print a single color. So whatever the color of the filament is, that's the color of what you've created is going to be. All right, I'm just going to move this shape window out of my way, this inspector, and I'm going to look at my block. So right now my block is a cube. It's 20 by 20 by 20. I can click on any one of these white squares and I can drag my block to make it different size. So I'm going to drag it. I'm going to try to make my block 50 millimeters long by 20 millimeters wide. And as you see, it's not that easy. It takes a lot of practice. But here's the thing. I can cheat a little bit because these white blocks, after I've clicked on that white square on the corner of my item, whatever it is, those white blocks, I can edit them. I can put in what I want my dimensions to be into those white blocks so that each of them is the dimension I want it to be. So that's how that works. Now right now it's good, it's 20 by 50, but it's still pretty thick. When we do 3D printing, we try to keep things a bit thin. We are making a keychain today, so when we're making a keychain, we had to be very careful about how big it's going to be. It's got to fit in our pocket, right? So I need to make this keychain a bit thinner, and that's from a height perspective, right? So how thick it is, height-wise. So I'm going to click on the center block to change that. I'm going to drag it down until I get it down to about 5 millimeters. That's a good thickness. That's been our experience with these in the past. That's how we've been able to do them and print a lot of them over a period of time. It works out very well for us. So now when I click off it, I have a rectangle that is 5 millimeters high. It is 50 millimeters wide. 50 millimeters wide and 10 millimeters deep. Okay, so now when I click on the shape, you can see 50, 20, and then when you click in the middle, you can see the 5. So that gives me all of my dimensions for my shape. Now, when you click on it, you see that you get a few other things. You'll get a protractor when you go to the rotation. That allows you to rotate your item. You can rotate it a certain number of degrees, which is cool. It has its uses when we're doing more involved designs, but for today, we're going to keep things pretty well on an even keel. This other thing you're going to see here is this conical shape, this black conical shape. That is a shape that allows you to pull whatever it is you're designing off the bed. So if you have a design that you want to have something one on top of the other, well, you can pull it off the bed and slide it in under or on top of as necessary. To demonstrate this, I'm going to go to the front view. So I'm going to click on the word front. There's my front view. Notice that my block is sitting really nicely on my bed. Everything is working out really well. If I click on my conical piece, I can move it above my bed a certain distance. But don't forget, this is a 3D print we are doing. Because it's a 3D print, we want it to stay on our bed. So I'm going to move that back down to be at 0. So that everything is good for our print. Going back to my home view so I can see what I'm doing, and everything's working out there. Okay? Keep touching my face. I think it's because I'm not supposed to touch my face. So, moving on. So it's a keychain. So a keychain has a particular design element, and that design element is it has a hole, because you're going to want to put a ring on your keychain. You're going to want to make sure that your keychain has the capability of holding keys. Okay, so we're going to make a hole by picking the cylinder that is the whole cylinder. So it's a cylinder that looks like it's transparent. It's on top. I'm going to drag that over into my window. I'm going to lay it on top of my other shape. Notice when you look at the shape window now, it actually says it's a hole. It says what its sides are. It's 20 in sides. Okay, so that's all there. Move that window out of there. It's a large hole. It's taking up a lot of space. I don't want it that large, so I'm going to make it 5 by 5. Once again, I'm doing that little cheat where I put my 5s in. My cylinder is also not very well positioned, so I'm going to drag my cylinder to the position that I want it. Okay, so there we are. We're doing pretty good with that. I'm going to look at the top view again to see what I've got. My cylinder is pretty centered. I might want to move it a little bit, so I'm going to just move it just a touch to get it in a little bit of better position for me. Go back to my orthographic view. My perspective view. I'm going to put it up in the top corner because I want the ring to be able to go there, and I want it to be centered somewhere like that. So right now, when you look at it on top, you can't see it going right through. All you see is the whole cylinder. You see the base that we've created, the rectangle base that we've created. To see it, I need to group it. And to group it, I need to select the whole thing. So go out far around it and select the whole thing. Notice it tells me I have 2 shapes now selected when I look at my inspector. And notice that my group button is now illuminated, so I can use my group button. So I'm going to click group, and as soon as I click group, something miraculous sort of happens. My cylinder disappeared, but my hole appeared. So the cylinder, which was the hole, it came down and made the hole in my keychain. So I'm just going to check things now. My front looks good still. My perspective view looks good. My top view shows my hole. Things are looking pretty good. Okay? There are other things now. When I click on the shape, it just gives me a single shape. And that single shape I can mirror. So if I wanted to, I can click mirror and it'll allow me to choose which way I want to mirror it. So if I mirror it this way, it'll move my hole down there. If I mirror it this way, it'll move my hole to the other side. And if I mirror it this way, it doesn't do a heck of a lot because it's the way it's mirroring, that's the way it's working. So mirroring is one of those things you can do to switch the orientation of your design, which is a cool thing. So far, we've created a hole, we've created our base, we've seen how things view differently. We're now going to go and personalize our design. So I'm going to scroll down in the basic shapes of TinkerCad, and I'm going to find text. Now I'm going to grab text and I'm going to pull it onto my screen, and lo and behold, when I do that, it's huge. Text is so much bigger than my design, but don't forget, you can click on one of these corners and you can drag text until it is small enough to fit in your design like that. One of the reasons I changed the color of the cube that we worked with earlier is because it was also red. And red text and red cube was difficult to see, but now in the design you can see the text that's lying there perfectly. When you look at it from the top, you can see the text is there on your print. It looks good. It's centered pretty well. It all depends on how many letters you're going to use. You can use a bunch of letters if you want to. I try to keep things simple when it comes to 3D printing stuff like this. Going back to my perspective view, I'm going to click on the text specifically, and I'm going to show the inspector for text. And why I'm doing that is because that's going to give me my edit window for text, because right there is my text. There's a text window there that I can edit my text in. It'll also allow me to change my multilingual or language text into something, a sans text or a serif text. A sans text means it has no little jiggly things on the bottom, no serifs, that's what a serif is. That little base that you see in some fonts. Right now its height is at 10. I'm going to leave its height at 10. But I'm going to change its text because this is my keychain, so I'm not going to leave it as text keychain. I'm going to leave it as my keychain. So I'm going to change the text to my name. This is where I do the personalization. This is where that happens. So I'm going to close up that shape now. So right now, when you look at things, it's all very well and good. It's working out all right. We're not having any problems. So life is good. We can look at the top again. You can see my name is there. I've got it down a little bit from the hole. I don't want it to be very close to that. I want it to be very offset so that it prints correctly. Go back to my perspective view, and I can see, did everyone see though when I put that in there that it is 10 high? So my text goes all the way down. I'm just going to pull it off my thing for now, but it goes all the way down to the base of the plane. Now in the grand scheme of things of 3D printing, that doesn't hurt anything. It actually works out just fine, as long as it's not going down through the plane. So I'm going to pull it up a little bit to make sure it isn't. Okay. Let's look at the front. You can see that my text is a little bit higher and thicker than my keychain. I'm going to pull it down until it's right, also sitting on the plane like that. I can make that height of my text to be something else. I can actually change its height so that it's not 10. I can put it and place it so it's exactly on top. That's not an issue either way, but let's do it just for completeness sake. So I'm going to move that text. I'm going to make it 5. And then I'm going to drag it up so that it's on top of my design. And that's the proper way to do it. The other way is safe, but this is the proper way to do it. There's no gapping. When I look at it in my perspective, the other way, you can see that it's sitting on top fine. When I look at my front, there's no gapping in between. You can let it go down a little bit into it if you're a little bit nervous, but that will work as it is as well. So I personalize it with my name. I've got a hole in it. Now I'm going to put another element in there, okay? And the element I like to always put in there are hearts. So I'm going to pull the heart out. I'm not going to put it on top of my design yet because I'm going to make sure the design's going to work for me. So I'm going to pull it out here. I'm going to make the heart the same size as my cylinder was, 5 by 5, so it's a comparable size. I'm going to drag it over now, put it underneath where my cylinder was. I'm going to look at the top and see what the placement is. So there's my hole, there's my heart, there's my name. Everything is on my design. So believe it or not, this design is prepared to do a 3D print of. And as a design, it has some elements in it. You've got some elements of text. You've got an element of a created image, and you have the base of it itself. But of course, don't forget, just like we did with the cylinder, for this to be a completed design, I need to select all. And notice that it has 3 shapes in it now. And I'm going to group those shapes. When I group them, they all turn purple. I see that now they're all there. I look at the front, everything is joined well. I go back to my perspective, it looks good. Look at the top, everything looks good. So now it's time to save it. Now, most of these designs, just like when you're working in Google Docs or you're working in some other programs like Scratch, will be saved automatically. But to create something for 3D print, there's an export aspect that we have to do. So we're going to use that export aspect now. We're going to export to download it for 3D printing. So right now it says include everything in the design. We're going to stay on the download because for today we're not connected directly to a 3D printer, and not many of you have one at home. But when school comes back in, you'll be able to send these STL files to us and we will print them off for you. So for 3D printing, there are 3 choices: OBJ, STL, and GLTF, or .glb files. STL is like the most common design file for 3D printing. We find STL in Google SketchUp, we find it in SolidWorks, we find it in a lot of different things that deal with design. Autodesk itself has STL. So I'm going to click the STL. It's actually going to download that for me right away. And it's going to fall into the download folder. You'll see it's happening right here. Display the progress. There's my keychain. It's downloaded. So that's ready to go. I can go into my downloads folder and find that file and I can send it to someone. Or if you click the send to, you can picture your design and you can send it to some 3D community, or you can invite a link to your design to other people. So if you wanted to invite someone else to be a part of your design, you can invite them here, which is a very cool aspect of TinkerCad. So I'm going to go back to the TinkerCad dashboard just to show you where your design is. As soon as I click on the dashboard, it saves my work, and my design of keychain is there. Every time you log in, whatever designs you've created are going to be available to you here in the keychain, here in the TinkerCad dashboard. So my keychain is available here. So I can click on this It will come up in the screen. It will give me a larger picture of what it is. It's just taking a few seconds for it to load. And if I wanted to edit this, I can tinker it. So tinker this means edit, or I can download it freshly again to have something. I can also change its name, and if I don't like it anymore, I can delete it. So those are two elements that you can do with this as well. So that is the simple design process. We're about 30 minutes into our YouTube today. So I wanted to do some other stuff with that. Let's take a look at what other things you can do with TinkerCad. I'm going to show you an interesting design thing called code blocks. I'm just going to do a very basic examination of code blocks. So I'm going to click on code blocks. I'm going to create a new code block. And it's going to come into a series of designs that I can start with, a bunch of starter designs that I can code. But let's go into the new design part. And I'm just going to show you the very basics of what you can do with design in code blocks. There's my window. I can see my code blocks window. I can see now to the right of my code blocks, there's my work plane. And here's the interesting thing about code blocks. Code blocks is like a coding design marriage. They're together. You code your design to occur. So it's really interesting to try to create the same design you just created. So I'm going to, looking at here, if you've done block coding before, you can see that I have shapes, modify, and control. I can do math. I can input data. And I can do markup. For us today, we're going to do things very simply. We're going to do design elements, but you can do code blocks to design things much more complicated than what we're going to do today. So I'm going to go to modify. I'm going to pull over my create new object. This is going to be object 0. I'm going to come to shape, and I'm going to pull out a box shape, just like we did before. I'm going to edit that block shape. I'm just going to move it over here so I can see it a bit better. So remember, we had a length of 50. Sorry, I got that wrong. Width of 20, a length of 50, and a height of 5. Just going to move this over a little bit more so we can see that. So if I simulate that now, if I go to press the play button, it's going to do that to start. It's going to create a new object, add it to my work plane. And there's my keychain. Now, it's not the exact orientation I had before, so I'm going to orient it a little bit different. I'm going to rotate it about its own axis by 90 degrees from the pivot point. So let's go back up. Notice that that pivot point is not the right one because I've rotated around the x-axis. So this is a case of just changing. There we go. Z-axis is what I should have gone around. So there's my keychain already started. All very good. I've got my base done. So what was the next thing I did? I brought in some text. So I'm going to bring down the code block of text. And when I arrow this over, it gives me the text window to be able to put in my own text. And it also gives me what my height is going to be. And right now my height is 10. I'm going to leave my height at 10. We're going to play our coding and see what happens. There's my text. It's too large, so I'm going to have to make it smaller. So let's find a modify that will change the size or scale. So let's scale. Let's do a little exploration. If I leave scale at 1, 1, 1, it stays where it is. So obviously I need to put these in as smaller digits. 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Take a look. And there, it's made my John perfectly in the center. So there's my name on my code. I can look at the front. I can see it there. I'm going to need to make it a little bit higher than 10 because right now it's not coming up enough. So I'm going to make it 15. Create, create, create. Look at the front. There's my name. It's going through the top and the bottom. It's equally distant. So I've got my name there. Next thing I need to do is take a shape. Take the cylinder. Make it into a hole. Make my cylinder. Don't forget it was a height of, I'm going to make the height 15. Sorry, the radius was a radius of 5. I'm going to make the height 15. We press our code block. There's my cylinder. Now it's not in the right place, so I need to move it or modify it so that it moves into a different place. So I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it X and Y. We'll just do a bit of experimentation here again, 10 and 10. It's moved it to the right. So I'm going to have to use minus 10 with my X. So it moves it to the left. You get the idea that each of these code blocks is going to create something just like we created it in the other window. I can then create a group of the whole thing. Sorry, I'm going to move over here for a second. I got ahead of myself. I can now select everything in there, select all in object, and then I can create a group. And when I run everything now, it will create everything as it is as a single group. Now notice my cylinder is still in the wrong position. I can adapt that, move it into a position again so I can make it. So minus 10, it wasn't bad, so I'm going to go minus 15. And I'm going to go Y 5. And I'm going to make the radius 2.5 because my cylinder is a little bit too big. And there you go. I'm getting it closer and closer each time. Minus 20. And through trying each time, I get to create the exact same thing I created in the other program, in the other part of TinkerCad. So by using these blocks, I can create the same things I can in TinkerCad, but I can create them using coding blocks. And why that's important is because I can create the same thing over and over again with different names without having to go through the step process. Everything I do in here, I can change just limited things in here and create wholly new designs each time. So I'm going to go back to my, well, first off, I'm going to give it a new name. I'm going to call it keychain code. Go back to my TinkerCad dashboard, and we're going to do the next part, which is circuits. So TinkerCad allows you to also create virtual circuits that you can then create your own circuits with at home. So we're going to do a little bit of an overview of what this is all about. I'm going to click on Create New Circuit. Create New Circuit brings up a very familiar window. Notice I have that capability of rotation. I have a name that is a adjective in somebody's name. I have a circuit view. I can also do a component list. I have my next menu down, that rotation button, my ever-present delete or trash can, my undo and redo buttons. I can also annotate my circuit, and I can view hide sections of my circuit. So I'm just going to try a very basic circuit. I'm going to try an LED circuit. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Not quite that large. And I'm going to find a battery. So I'm just going to scroll down till I find the 3-volt battery. I'm going to pull that back. So that's like the coin batteries, the CR2032s that you have as a watch battery, something like that. Now that's a little bit too much voltage for most LEDs. So I'm also going to require a resistor. Now I'm going to take my resistor and I'm going to place it over here. Okay. Now I can make a circuit from this. And I'm going to draw wires. So you click on the end of one of these items, one of these circuit elements, and you drag down and it'll create a wire for you. You then can, when you have it a certain distance or straightness, you can click it and it'll make a little right turn for you, and then it'll connect to the negative element of your coin battery. I can then take the other end of my resistor and connect that to my LED. I can take the anode of my LED. I can just go straight here because you can see it very clearly. Click it on my coin battery, and now I have a complete circuit. The reason there's a resistor here is because the coin battery at 3 volts has too much power for an LED normally, and everything in here is accurate. Even though it's simulated, it's accurate. I've got my long leg of my LED attached to my positive, my short leg attached to my negative. I'm going to start my simulation and see what I see. And if I got everything connected correctly, my LED lights up. Look at that. So you can make it a bit more complicated, and that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to stop my simulation because I don't want to burn out my LED. I can take that wire I put up here. I can press the delete button and it goes away. I'm going to move my coin battery over. Notice that the connection I already had created between it and the resistor still exists. It doesn't move away because the wire just extends out, so as I move it around. So this time I'm going to put a switch in place. So the switch is going to be what initializes everything. So by putting a switch in here, I'm going to allow me to be able to turn on and off my circuit once I start my simulation. So the first thing I need to do is connect my anode to one part of my switch, to terminal 1. And then I need to carry the common or center to my battery. I'm going to click Start My Simulation. Actually, I'm going to move my switch position. Sorry, I'm going to start my simulation. Notice that my switch is on, but when I slide it over here, my switch is off because I'm no longer making the connection between the common position and terminal 1. As soon as I move my switch to the other position, it's working. Gonna move off a little bit so we can see a bit better. So you can try this with a bunch of different components of a basic circuit. You can try a 9-volt battery, a 1.5-volt battery. You can incorporate Arduinos and DC motors. You can incorporate micro servos, gear motors. All sorts of things can be put into this circuit. Folks, that's circuits in a nutshell. We're not going to go too long over. I think we're doing okay with regards to time. It's all working out. So we're going to go back to our TinkerCad main window. I just want to go back to 3D designs. Notice that it saved my circuit. And if you go down to code blocks, it saved my keychain code. But I want to go back to create a new design. I want to try something a little bit more difficult. I'm going to try to design a little house. So we're back in this window. It'll take a few minutes now. I'm going to pull a block over. That block is going to be my house, but but I'm going to make it a certain size. I want it to be a larger, squarer block. Move it up here so we can see it. Move my shape out of the way. So it's, you know, it's pretty well a square house. In Newfoundland parlance, we would call this, if I was doing it correctly, we would call this a salt box type house. I'm going to make it a little bit taller. I'm going to make it a 2-story. Do something interesting with this box though before I do the next part. I'm actually going to put a box that is empty or a hole in the center of this block. So right now the block I have is 41 high and it is 54 by 63. So this block over here, I'm going to bring it down to shape. Remember the sizes we were dealing with here? We were dealing with a height of 41. Well, I'm going to make the height of this one 41. Exactly. That's because when you think about it, the walls of a house, you should have a floor, and we might pull it up so you get a floor, but the inside of a house really has to have a big blank space in the middle. So remember what size we were over here. Get the shape out of the way. We were 54 by 63. So I'm going to make this the same size. 54 by 63. So 54, 63. So right now, if I put it over top of the block, it's exactly the same size, but I don't want it to be exactly the same size. So I'm just going to move things around a bit so I can see what's happening. I need it to be a little bit less big, about 1 millimeter on each side to represent what the outside walls of a house would be. So I'm going to make this one 52, and I'm going to make this one 61. Now I can take my box that's a hole, and I can orient it right in the middle of my big block. I'm going to look at top, see what I got done. See how it's going around the outside? It's almost perfectly. Not quite perfectly, but it's pretty close to perfectly. To see what it looks like, I'm going to actually select it all and group it. Now I have a box that is hollow. This is also not only good for a house, it's also good for creating things in 3D printing like boxes. We do some work on boxes and containers here at Brilliant Labs. We've done some things that are designed to hold things for us that we can put on the wall, that we can put on our whiteboards or our smart boards. So this is one of the elements that you have to do. You have to hollow that box out to see how everything comes together. But I was creating a house, don't forget. So a house needs a roof. There's a roof right there. As we scroll down, we see roof. I'm going to pull roof over. Now that's not a very big roof. Do you remember what the size of our box was? 54 by 63. Now, should I make that exactly the same size? If I make it exactly the same size, the roof will lay right exactly on top of the walls. Actually, I have that sideways. So now if I take this and I go to that conical piece that we've talked about before, I can drag that up and I can move it over on top of my house. Now, quite often when you're doing the design of a house or a design of something like this, you're going to want an overhang. In a house, that's called an eave, and that's a whole other discussion. Notice that my roof is a little bit above my house, so I need to pull it down to be exactly on the height of the house, which was 40. What was the height of my house? 41. And now my roof is exactly there. So I've got my roof exactly on top of my house. I can look around and see what it looks like. My right view. I have a problem. So I'm going to have to move it a little bit. Not rotate it, move it. until it centers right. So that looks good from the right. It looks good from the back. Looks okay from the left. It's a little bit off from the front. Be careful, you just move in one direction. Then we go up on top and take a look at what that looks from there. Looks okay. Everything's looking very good on my house. From the bottom, I don't see any overhangs. Everything is good. So even though this is a large item, because it's hollow, it won't take as much material to print. And I can group the two together to turn them into a single entity, the same way I group everything else, by hitting the group button. Now the neat thing about this sort of design is because I have it hollowed out, I can put windows in it. And I do that by using my block shape. I'm going to go back to my perspective view, pull out a box, and I'm going to make a door here now. So I'm going to make this 10 millimeters. I'm going to make it thin because it doesn't have to be very big. And I'm going to make it about 16 high. So I'm going to grab that now. And without changing its height, grabbing things sometimes is difficult. I'm going to put it right in the front of my house, like that. Look at the front, there he is, he's there. Go back up. I'm going to select all. I'm going to group. And now you can see in my house. I've got something left over there. Oh, I've got some blocks out there in no man's land that I got to get rid of. Notice that when I clicked on that, I got a couple of extra views. That's because I left blocks out nowhere. That happens. Now you can see into the house. You can see that the cut is going in. You can see the wall on the other side. This view, this project view, will allow you to see if you have anything extra left there, which is always good to have. Go back to my perspective view. I can also use this exact same thing to put windows in there. But it's getting kind of late for today. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you everyone for being a part of this with us today. Quite enjoyed my time. I've enjoyed all of you being with us. And I'm seeing some commentary there. So it's all there and everything looks pretty good. Hopefully everyone is well with you and all things are going well. We will have an opportunity to say hello again some other time. Have a great day.